The holographic display showed red dots moving toward human space like drops of blood in water. Alex Reed watched the enemy formation from her command chair, her fingers drumming against the armrest in patterns that matched tactical equations. At 24, she possessed the youngest mind ever to command a battle cruiser in the Galactic Defense Armada. Captain, Admiral Brooks is requesting all ship commanders report to the flagship for emergency briefing, Lieutenant Kane announced from the communications station. Alex nodded, her green eyes never leaving the display. The hegemony had finally made their move. 7 alien species working together, all convinced that humanity needed to be stopped before they spread too far into the galaxy. She had studied their previous conflicts, analyzed their battle patterns, and reached conclusions that made her superiors uncomfortable. The shuttle bay of Admiral Brooks's flagship buzzed with activity as captains from 200 ships gathered in the main briefing room. Alex entered to find herself surrounded by officers who had been fighting space battles since before she was born. Gray hair, scars, and the confident bearing of veterans filled the room. She took a seat near the back, ignoring the sideways glances, and whispered comments about her age. Admiral Brooks, a man whose career spanned 4 decades, activated the central projector. Intelligence confirms the hegemony has launched a full-scale assault on Haven Prime. Their fleet consists of approximately 300 vessels utilizing adaptive shielding technology. The room fell silent. We will engage them at maximum range and utilize standard battle formations. Alex raised her hand. Sir, with respect, standard formations won't work against adaptive shields. Each attack will make them stronger. Brooks's weathered face hardened. Captain Reed, your unconventional tactics worked well against pirates and raiders. This is a different kind of war. That's exactly why we need different tactics, Alex replied, standing up. The hegemony's adaptive technology learns from our weapon signatures. Every shot we fire teaches their shields how to resist the next one. We need to overwhelm them with quantum disruption patterns that change faster than their systems can adapt. Captain Martinez from the heavy cruiser Thunderbolt shook his head. You're talking about coordinating quantum frequencies across 200 ships while under fire. It's impossible. It's difficult, not impossible, Alex corrected. I've run simulations. We can create rotating frequency patterns that shift every 30 seconds. Their adaptation cycle takes at least 90 seconds based on captured hegemony technology reports. Brooks cut her off with a gesture. Captain Reed, your enthusiasm is noted. However, this fleet will follow proven battle doctrine. You'll command the reserve formation with 12 ships. Stay back and protect the supply vessels. The dismissal stung, but Alex had expected it. She had been fighting this attitude since graduating from the academy at 19, too young, too inexperienced, too willing to take risks that older officers considered reckless. As the briefing ended, Alex approached Captain Wilson from the destroyer Hunter. David Wilson had served with her father before his death in the Outer Rim conflicts. You know I'm right about the adaptive shields, she said quietly. Wilson sighed. Maybe. But Brooks commands this fleet, not you. And after what happened to your father trying one of his crazy maneuvers. My father saved 3 colony ships with that crazy maneuver, Alex interrupted. The fact that he died doing it doesn't make it wrong. It makes it costly, Wilson replied. We can't afford to lose ships on experimental tactics. Back aboard her ship, the battle cruiser Defiant, Alex gathered her senior officers in the tactical planning room. Her crew was young by military standards, most of them graduates from the same accelerated program that had fast-tracked her own career. The Admiral wants us to babysit supply ships while the real fleet engages, she told them. But we're going to be ready for something more important. Commander Lisa Park, her second in command, pulled up the latest intelligence reports. The hegemony formation is interesting. 7 different species means 7 different tactical philosophies trying to work together. That's their weakness, Alex agreed. Each species has their own way of fighting. The Voterans prefer direct assault. The Kellish use flanking maneuvers. The Drakmori rely on superior firepower. Individually, they're formidable. Together, they have to compromise. Tactical Officer Ben Torres highlighted sections of the enemy formation on the main display. If we can force them to choose between species-specific tactics and unified strategy, we might create confusion in their command structure. Alex smiled. Her crew understood what the senior commanders missed. War wasn't just about firepower and armor. It was about thinking faster than your enemy, adapting quicker, and finding advantages where none seemed to exist. The journey to the engagement zone took 18 hours. Alex spent most of that time reviewing everything known about hegemony, technology, and tactics. The adaptive shields were their greatest advantage, but they required enormous power and processing capability. That meant other systems had to be running at reduced efficiency. "Captain," Communications Officer Sarah Kim called out, "We're receiving distress signals from Haven Prime. The colony is under bombardment." Alex watched the tactical display as it updated with real-time information from the embattled colony. The hegemony wasn't just attacking military targets. They were systematically destroying infrastructure, power plants, and civilian shelters. This wasn't conquest. It was extermination. "They're not trying to capture the planet," she realized aloud. "They want to make an example. Show other human colonies what happens to species that expand too aggressively." The main fleet moved into formation ahead of them. Alex watched from the reserve position as 200 human ships arranged themselves in the classic hammer and anvil pattern that had won battles for centuries. It was textbook perfect, which meant it was exactly what the hegemony expected. Her tactical screen chimed with incoming data. Long-range sensors detected the enemy fleet emerging from hyperspace near Haven Prime. The hegemony ships moved with precision that spoke of careful planning and superior coordination. Their formations were flawless, their positioning optimal, for mutual support. "All ships, this is Admiral Brooks. Engage at will." The first exchange of fire lit up space like a deadly fireworks display. Human plasma cannons and particle beams struck hegemony vessels, and for a moment Alex thought the battle might go their way. Enemy shields flared and weakened under the concentrated assault. Then the adaptive technology began to work. The second wave of human attacks had visibly less effect. The third wave barely scratched enemy armor. Within 10 minutes, the hegemony ships were advancing through human fire as if it were rain. "Admiral Brooks is calling for concentrated fire on the enemy flagship," Kane reported. Alex watched in growing horror as the human fleet poured everything they had into a single target. The hegemony flagship's shields adapted completely within 3 minutes. By the time the assault ended, human weapons couldn't even generate a flicker of damage against enemy defenses. The hegemony counterattack was devastating. Their weapons showed no signs of adaptation requirements. Energy beams and projectile weapons tore through human shields like they were made of paper. Ships began dying. "Captain," Park said quietly, "we need to do something." Alex stared at the tactical display. The main fleet was being slaughtered, exactly as she had predicted. Standard tactics were worse than useless against an enemy that learned from every attack. But she had orders to protect the supply ships, and breaking formation without authorization was a court-martial offense. The first human ship exploded in a brief, brilliant flash. Then another. The battle was becoming a massacre, and the youngest captain in Armada history sat in the reserve formation, watching her people die because nobody would listen to a 24-year-old who thought she knew better than decorated veterans. She made her decision. Emergency klaxons screamed across the bridge as another human cruiser disappeared in a ball of superheated gas. Alex had watched 17 ships die in the past hour, while following orders to remain in formation. The hegemony fleet advanced like predators who had learned their prey could not hurt them. All reserve ships maintained position. Admiral Brooks's voice crackled over the communication system. His flagship was taking heavy damage, but he still insisted on outdated tactics that fed human vessels into the enemy's adaptive defenses. Alex studied the tactical display with growing desperation. The hegemony formation was perfect from a defensive standpoint, but their 7 different species created subtle gaps in coordination. The Voteran ships moved aggressively, while the Kellish vessels preferred cautious positioning. Those cultural differences created tiny windows of opportunity that lasted only seconds. "Commander Park, prepare the ship for emergency acceleration," Alex ordered quietly. "Captain, Admiral Brooks specifically ordered us to protect the supply vessels, Park reminded her. The supply vessels won't need protection if the entire fleet is destroyed, Alex replied. She opened a channel to the other 11 ships in the reserve formation. This is Captain Reed. I'm breaking formation to attempt a flanking maneuver. Any ship that wants to follow me is welcome. Any ship that prefers to follow orders should continue protecting the supply vessels. Captain Martinez from the destroyer, Swift immediately responded. Reed, you're talking about mutiny. I'm talking about winning, Alex shot back. Look at your screens. We're losing this battle because we're fighting it wrong. The Admiral's tactics are getting our people killed. She cut the channel before anyone could argue further and addressed her bridge crew. We're going to execute a quantum disruption attack on the enemy's left flank. Their formation has a gap between the Voteran assault ships and the Kellish support vessels. We can exploit that weakness if we move fast enough. The Defiant broke formation along with 3 other ships from the reserve. Captain Wilson in the Hunter, Captain Torres in the Valiant, and Captain Davis in the Resolute had decided to trust the youngest commander in the fleet, rather than watch more ships die following failed strategies. Alex's plan required precise timing and perfect coordination. The 4 ships would approach the hegemony formation from below the galactic plane, using sensor shadows from destroyed human vessels to mask their approach. Once in position, they would simultaneously fire quantum disruption bursts designed to overload the enemy's adaptive processing systems. Quantum generators at maximum output, reported Chief Engineer Mike O'Brien over the intercom. We've got maybe 5 minutes before the power systems start melting. The approach took 12 minutes of silent running through a debris field that had once been the heavy cruiser Olympus and her escort destroyers. Alex watched the tactical display as her small formation moved into position, hoping the hegemony's attention remained focused on the main battle. All ships on my mark, Alex whispered into her headset. 3, 2, 1 mark. 4 ships fired simultaneously. Quantum disruption bursts struck the gap in the hegemony formation just as a group of Voteran ships moved to exploit a weakness in the human line. The alien vessel's shields flickered and failed for exactly 18 seconds. In those 18 seconds, Alex's ships poured conventional weapons fire into exposed hegemony hulls. 3 enemy vessels took critical damage before their adaptive systems compensated for the quantum disruption. It was the first significant damage the hegemony had taken in the entire battle. The enemy response was immediate and overwhelming. Every ship in the alien formation turned toward Alex's tiny force. Hundreds of energy beams and projectile weapons focused on 4 human vessels that had dared to hurt the supposedly invincible hegemony fleet. All power to rear shields, Alex ordered as the first enemy salvo struck. The Defiant shuddered under the impact, but her deflectors held. Evasive maneuvers, don't let them get a targeting lock. The Hunter wasn't as fortunate. Captain Wilson's destroyer took a direct hit from a Drakmori heavy cannon and broke apart in 3 sections. Wilson's last transmission was a simple good luck, kid, before his ship's reactor exploded. Alex felt the loss like a physical blow, but she couldn't afford to grieve. The Valiant and Resolute were taking heavy damage, and the Defiant's shields were failing under concentrated fire. Her gamble had proven that the hegemony could be hurt, but it was about to cost 4 ships and their entire crews. Then the impossible happened. Admiral Brooks's voice cut through the battle communications on an open channel. All ships execute Quantum Disruption Formation 7. I repeat, Formation 7. Formation 7 was Alex's theoretical tactical arrangement, the one she had proposed during the briefing, and been told was impossible to execute. Brooks was ordering the entire surviving fleet to attempt her plan. The next few minutes created chaos that would be studied in military academies for generations. 68 surviving human ships attempted to coordinate quantum frequency rotations while under fire from an enemy that had been winning the battle. Ships collided, weapon systems overloaded, and more than one vessel fired on friendly targets. By mistake, but it worked. For the first time since the battle began, hegemony shields failed across multiple vessels. Human weapons found targets, enemy ships took damage, and the relentless alien advance slowed to a halt. Alex brought her ship around to support the main fleet's assault on a Kellish heavy cruiser, whose shields had completely collapsed. The Defiance. Particle beams carved deep gouges in the enemy hull before the adaptive systems compensated and restored defensive barriers. "Captain, we're receiving a priority message from Admiral Brooks," Kane announced. The Admiral's face appeared on the main screen. Brooks looked like he had aged 10 years in the past hour, but his voice was steady. "Captain Reed, report to my flagship immediately after the battle. Your tactical innovations may have saved the fleet." The battle continued for another 6 hours, but the momentum had shifted. The hegemony's technological advantages couldn't overcome the confusion created by constantly changing quantum frequencies. Human losses were severe. 43 more ships were destroyed, but the enemy fleet eventually retreated rather than face complete annihilation. Alex surveyed the EOG's aftermath from her damaged bridge. Of the 200 ships that had entered battle, only 96 remained operational. The supply vessels she had been ordered to protect were mostly intact, but the fighting fleet had been devastated. "Casualty reports are coming in," Park said, quietly. 37,000 personnel lost, including Admiral Brooks. Alex felt the weight of command settle on her shoulders like a physical burden. Brooks had died when his flagship took a direct hit during the final hegemony assault. As the senior surviving officer, command of the remaining fleet fell to the youngest captain in Armada history. "Signal all ships," she ordered. "This is Captain Reed assuming fleet command. All vessels report status and begin damage assessment procedures." The responses came slowly. Many ships had taken significant damage, and several were operating with skeleton crews after losing personnel to hull breaches and system failures. Captain Martinez from the Thunderbolt was now missing his left arm after an explosion on his bridge. Captain Kim's destroyer had lost main power and was running on emergency batteries. "Captain," Torres called from the Valiant, "what are your orders?" Alex looked at the tactical display showing the battered remnants of humanity's greatest fleet. The hegemony had retreated, but they would return with reinforcements. The adaptive shielding technology would be improved based on data gathered during this battle. Next time, even quantum disruption attacks might prove ineffective. She was 24 years old, commanding 96 damaged ships with no reinforcements available and an enemy that learned from every engagement. The senior officers who had dismissed her theories were mostly dead, leaving her responsible for decisions that would determine humanity's survival. "We're going to do something the hegemony won't expect," she told the fleet. "We're going to study how they think, learn their weaknesses, and turn their own advantages against them. This war isn't over." Private communications channels buzzed with comments about the young captain who had been forced into command. Some officers expressed confidence in her tactical abilities. Others worried about her inexperience and tendency toward risky strategies. All of them understood that their survival now depended on ideas that conventional military doctrine considered impossible. Alex stared at the star charts showing hegemony territory. Somewhere in that vast region of space, 7 alien species were planning humanity's destruction. They possessed superior technology, overwhelming numbers, and the ability to adapt to any attack. But they had never faced a human commander who understood that sometimes the best way to win was to break every rule in the book. 3 weeks after the disaster at Haven Prime, Alex floated in zero gravity inside the cargo bay of an abandoned mining station, studying holographic projections of hegemony ship movements. Her fleet had been running constant hit-and-run attacks, striking supply convoys and isolated patrol groups before disappearing into asteroid fields and nebula clouds. The strategy was working, but the cost was brutal. Every engagement taught the enemy something new about human tactics. The hegemony's adaptive technology was evolving faster than anyone had anticipated, and their retaliation was becoming increasingly vicious. "Captain, long-range sensors detect a hegemony battle group approaching the Kepler system," reported Lieutenant Kane from the temporary command center they had established in the station's old control room. Alex pushed off from the cargo bay wall and drifted toward the exit. The Kepler system contained 4 human colonies with a combined population of 12 million. If the hegemony reached those worlds, they would repeat what they had done to Haven Prime. How many ships? She asked as she entered the control room. 47 vessels, including 6 of their new adaptive cruisers. Park responded from the sensor station. They're learning from our attacks. These ships have upgraded shielding that adapts in 30 seconds instead of 90. Alex studied the tactical display showing her remaining forces. 31 ships, most carrying battle damage that couldn't be properly repaired without returning to a major shipyard. The crew was exhausted from constant combat, and ammunition supplies were running dangerously low. Signal the fleet, Alex ordered. All ships prepare for emergency jump to the Kepler system. We're going to try something new. Captain Martinez appeared on the communications screen from his heavy cruiser. His left arm was still in a sling from the battle at Haven Prime, but his eyes held the confidence of a man who had learned to trust his young commander's instincts. Reed, you can't be serious about engaging 47 ships with our current force, he said. We need to evacuate the colonies and fall back to Earth. The hegemony expects us to run, Alex replied. They're counting on us being predictable. That's why we're going to do exactly the opposite of what military doctrine says we should do. She outlined her plan to the assembled captains. Instead of engaging the enemy fleet directly, they would use the asteroid belt around Kepler Station to create an electromagnetic pulse powerful enough to disrupt hegemony adaptive systems across multiple ships simultaneously. The mineral composition of the asteroids contained enough ferromagnetic materials to generate a massive field if properly detonated. You're talking about turning asteroids into weapons, Captain Davis said from the Resolute. The energy requirements alone would drain our ship's power systems completely. Which is why we're only going to get one shot at this, Alex acknowledged. Every ship will have to commit everything they have to the pulse generation. If it doesn't work, we'll be sitting targets. The debate continued for an hour. Several captains pointed out the enormous risks involved. Others argued that conventional tactics had already proven useless against hegemony adaptive technology. In the end, they agreed to attempt Alex's plan because no one could suggest a better alternative. The preparation took 6 hours. Engineers worked frantically to modify weapon systems for pulse generation, while navigation officers calculated precise positioning requirements. The plan required 28 ships to simultaneously discharge their power cores through modified, particle beam arrays aimed at specific asteroids containing high concentrations of iron and nickel. Captain Torres to all ships, came the transmission from the Valiant. Hegemony advanced scouts have entered the system. We've got maybe 30 minutes before the main fleet arrives. Alex watched the tactical display as enemy ships spread out to sweep the system for human forces. The hegemony scouts moved with mechanical precision, their formation designed to provide maximum sensor coverage while maintaining mutual support distances. All ships execute formation Delta, Alex ordered. Remember, we need to be in position before their adaptive sensors identify our energy signatures. The human fleet moved through the asteroid field like ghosts, using the space rocks to mask their approach. Each ship had to navigate to a specific position that would allow their weapons to strike predetermined targets at exactly the right angle. The margin for error was essentially zero. Hegemony main fleet dropping out of hyperspace, Park reported. 47 ships confirmed. They're moving toward the inner planets. Alex could see the enemy formation on her display. The hegemony had learned from previous encounters and arranged their ships to minimize vulnerability to quantum disruption attacks. Their new adaptive cruisers formed a protective shell around more vulnerable support vessels. All ships, power to maximum, Alex announced. On my mark, fire everything at your designated targets. The next few seconds would determine whether humanity survived as an independent species or joined the long list of civilizations that had challenged the hegemony and lost. Alex watched the countdown timer reach 0 and gave the order that would either save her people or destroy what remained of their fleet. Mark. 28 human ships fired simultaneously. Particle beams, plasma cannons, and modified quantum disruptors struck asteroids throughout the belt, triggering a chain reaction that had never been attempted in actual combat. The asteroids exploded in carefully calculated sequences, releasing clouds of supercharged metallic particles that created an electromagnetic field spanning thousands of cubic kilometers. The effect on the hegemony fleet was immediate and devastating. Every ship in the enemy formation lost shield power, as their adaptive systems struggled to compensate for electromagnetic interference they had never encountered. For almost 3 minutes, 47 alien vessels drifted through space with their defenses completely offline. All ships, conventional weapons free, Alex ordered. Hit them with everything we have left. The human counterattack was the most concentrated firepower display in the war so far. Ships that had been running low on ammunition emptied their magazines into exposed hegemony hulls. Plasma beams carved through alien armor, while projectile weapons punched holes in enemy ships that had seemed invulnerable just minutes earlier. 12. Hegemony vessels were destroyed before their adaptive systems compensated for the electromagnetic interference. The survivors immediately focused their fire on the human ships responsible for the attack, and the battle became a desperate close-range slugging match among the asteroids. The Valiant took a direct hit from 3 enemy ships and broke apart in an expanding sphere of debris and atmosphere. Captain Torres had time to transmit, "Tell my family I love them," before his reactor exploded. Alex felt each loss like a knife wound, but she couldn't afford to grieve for friends who had trusted her with their lives. The Hunter's replacement, a destroyer called the Storm, lost main power and drifted helplessly toward a Drakmori cruiser that was preparing to finish it off. Captain Kim's crew managed to restore emergency power just long enough to ram their ship into the alien vessel, destroying both in a brilliant flash that lit up the entire asteroid field. "Captain, we're down to 19 operational ships," Park reported as explosions continued to illuminate the darkness around them. "The Resolute has lost life support, and the Thunderbolt is reporting critical damage to their reactor core." Alex looked at the tactical display showing the remains of 2 fleets that had torn each other apart among the asteroids. The Hegemony had lost 21 ships, but their remaining forces still outnumbered the humans. Worse, their adaptive systems were already compensating for the electromagnetic interference. "Signal all ships to prepare for retreat," she ordered reluctantly. "We've done as much damage as we can." "Captain," Kane called out urgently, "I'm receiving a transmission from Kepler Station. The civilian evacuation fleet is under attack by hegemony reinforcements." Alex's blood turned to ice. While the main battle had raged in the asteroid belt, a second enemy force had bypassed the fighting and moved directly toward the civilian colonies. 12 evacuation transports carrying 2 million refugees were being systematically destroyed by alien warships. "How many ships?" she asked. 8. Hegemony vessels, including 2 of their planet-killer cruisers, Kane replied. "The evacuation fleet has no military escort." Alex stared at the display showing her 19 damaged ships against 8 fresh enemy vessels. Her crews were exhausted, ammunition was nearly depleted, and several ships were barely capable of maintaining life support. Military logic said to retreat and preserve what remained of the fleet. Instead, she opened a channel to all human ships. "This is Captain Reed to all vessels. We have civilians under attack. I know you're tired, I know your ships are damaged, and I know the odds are against us. But those are our people dying out there." The response came immediately from Captain Martinez. "The Thunderbolt is with you, Captain. My reactor may be failing, but we've got enough power for one more fight." Captain Davis from the damaged Resolute managed to restore life support long enough to transmit, "The Resolute stands ready. We might not have much left, but we're not abandoning civilians." One by one, every surviving captain volunteered to join what they all knew was likely a suicide mission. Damaged ships with wounded crews prepared to face fresh enemy forces in order to protect evacuation transports that carried humanity's future. Alex felt the weight of command more heavily than ever as she gave the order to attack. She was leading the last remnants of humanity's fleet into a battle they couldn't win, gambling everything on the desperate hope that sacrifice might somehow create victory. The youngest captain in Armada history was about to discover whether courage could overcome impossible odds. Smoke filled the bridge of the Defiant as Alex watched the last evacuation transport disappear into hyperspace. The rescue mission had cost her 6 more ships, but 2 million civilians were safe. Her fleet now consisted of 13 battered vessels, hiding in the shadow of a gas giant's moon, nursing wounds that couldn't be healed without proper facilities. "Captain," Incoming transmission from Earth Command, Kane reported, his voice hoarse from breathing recycled air thick with the smell of burned electronics. Fleet Admiral Morrison's weathered face appeared on the damaged main screen. Behind him, Alex could see the controlled chaos of Earth's military command center. Captain Reed, I'm ordering you to return to Earth immediately. What remains of the fleet needs to be preserved for the defense of our home system. Alex studied the tactical display showing hegemony forces consolidating throughout human space. They had conquered 4 colony worlds in the past week, and their adaptive technology was evolving with each engagement. Soon, even her most creative tactics would prove useless against shields that could adapt in real time. Sir, with respect, falling back to Earth just delays the inevitable, she replied. The hegemony won't stop until they've destroyed every human settlement. We need to find a way to end this war, not just postpone our defeat. Morrison's expression hardened. Captain, you're speaking to your superior officer. I'm not asking for your opinion on strategic matters. Then I'm resigning my commission, Alex said calmly. As a civilian, I'm free to take whatever action I think will save humanity. The transmission ended abruptly as Morrison cut the connection. Alex turned to face her bridge crew, expecting to see shock or disapproval. Instead, she found determined faces that reflected her own resolve. Captain, Commander Park said quietly, if you're no longer in the military, technically we should arrest you and return you to Earth for court-martial. Alex nodded. That's correct. Any officer who wants to follow legal orders should take command of their ship and head home. I won't think less of anyone who makes that choice. The bridge remained silent for a long moment. Then Chief Engineer O'Brien spoke up from his position near the power distribution console. Well, I guess I'm not much of a military officer anyway. Always preferred fixing things to following orders. Lieutenant Kane turned from his communication station. My family died on Haven Prime. I'm staying. One by one, every member of the bridge crew declared their intention to remain with Alex despite the consequences. Similar conversations were taking place throughout the ship and across the small fleet. By the end of the day, not a single vessel had departed for Earth. Alex spent the next 72 hours studying everything intelligence had gathered about hegemony civilization. The 7 species maintained their alliance through a complex network of mutual dependencies and shared resources. More importantly, they coordinated their military actions through a series of communication hubs that enabled instant contact across thousands of light years. Their strength is also their weakness, she explained to her senior officers during an emergency meeting in the Defiance-damaged briefing room. The hegemony requires constant communication to maintain unity between 7 different species with conflicting interests. If we can disrupt that communication network, their alliance will collapse. Captain Martinez, now commanding the fleet's remaining heavy cruiser, pointed to the star charts showing hegemony territory. You're talking about simultaneous attacks on targets scattered across half the galaxy. We have 13 ships. Which is why each ship will have to operate independently, Alex replied. We'll divide into individual units and strike specific targets designed to sever the communication links between different regions of hegemony space. The plan she outlined was audacious even by her standards. Each ship would carry a quantum virus designed to introduce random delays and translation errors into hegemony communication systems. The virus wouldn't destroy their technology, but it would exploit the cultural and linguistic differences between the 7 species, turning their diversity into a source of confusion and conflict. The virus will work by inserting subtle mistranslations into military communications, explained Dr. Ellen Hayes, the fleet's senior computer specialist who had developed the program. A voter in order for aggressive attack might be translated to the Kelish as a request for defensive positioning. Within hours, their entire command structure will be paralyzed by misunderstandings. Captain Davis from the Resolute raised the obvious objection. This plan requires us to penetrate the most heavily defended systems in hegemony space. Most of us won't survive long enough to deploy the virus. Alex met his gaze steadily. You're right. This is a suicide mission for everyone involved. But it's also our only chance to save humanity. The hegemony's technological advantages are too great for conventional warfare. We need to win through unconventional means. The debate continued through the night as officers discussed the moral implications of what Alex was proposing. They would be asking crews to sacrifice their lives on a plan that had never been tested and might not work. Families would never know what happened to their loved ones. History might record them as deserters who fled rather than heroes who died. In the end, the decision came down to simple mathematics. 13 ships with exhausted crews couldn't defeat the hegemony in open battle. But 13 ships carrying quantum viruses to strategic targets might disrupt enemy communications long enough for the Alliance to tear itself apart. "All right," Martinez said finally. "I'll take the Thunderbolt to the Voteran homeworld. If I'm going to die, I might as well take out their primary military command center." Captain Davis volunteered to attack the central communication hub in Kellish space. Captain Foster from the destroyer Neptune chose to strike at the Drakmori fleet coordination facility. One by one, Alex's officers selected targets that would require them to penetrate the heart of enemy territory with no hope of escape. "What about you, Captain?" Park asked. "Which target are you taking?" Alex highlighted a system at the center of the tactical display. The Core Coordination Matrix. It's the hub that connects all 7 species communication networks. If the virus can be planted there, it will spread throughout the entire hegemony. Command structure. The implications were clear to everyone in the room. The core system was the most heavily defended location in hegemony space, protected by dozens of warships and automated defense platforms. Even reaching the target would require surviving defenses designed to stop entire fleets. Captain Torres, from the Valiant's replacement ship, Vengeance said quietly, "That's not just a suicide mission. That's impossible." Alex smiled grimly. "Impossible is what we do best. The hegemony thinks they understand human tactics because they've been studying our battles, but they've never faced a human who has nothing left to lose." The fleet spent its final week together preparing for missions that none of them expected to survive. Engineers worked around the clock to repair critical systems and load quantum virus packages into each ship's computer core. Medical officers prepared emergency supplies for crews who might be injured during the attacks. Chaplains held services for those who wanted to make peace with whatever gods they believed in. Alex found herself standing in the observation deck of the Defiant, looking out at stars that might be humanity's last view of the universe. Park joined her, carrying 2 cups of coffee that tasted like recycled chemicals but provided warmth in the cold of space. "Do you think it will work?" Park asked quietly. Alex considered the question for a long moment. "I think it's our best shot. Maybe our only shot. The hegemony's greatest strength is their unity. If we can turn that into weakness, we might create enough chaos for humanity to survive. And if we're wrong, then at least we'll die fighting instead of hiding," Alex replied. "Sometimes that's the best choice you have." The departure began at dawn, ship time. Each vessel left independently, heading for targets scattered across hegemony space. Alex watched from the bridge as her friends and colleagues disappeared into hyperspace, knowing she would never see any of them again. The Defiant was the last ship to leave, carrying its young captain toward a rendezvous with the most dangerous mission in human military history. Alex settled into her command chair and studied the navigation plot that would take her deep into the heart of enemy territory. "All stations report ready for hyperspace transit," Park announced. Alex nodded to her helmsman. "Take us out." The stars stretched into lines as the Defiant jumped to hyperspace, carrying the youngest captain in Armada history toward whatever fate awaited at the core of hegemony space. Deep in the heart of hegemony space, Alex watched as the massive orbital fortress came into view through the Defiant's cracked viewport. The structure was larger than any human space station, bristling with weapons that could vaporize a battleship with a single shot. Defensive satellites surrounded it like a swarm of metal wasps, their sensors sweeping space for any sign of intrusion. The Defiant drifted silent and cold through the outer defense perimeter, running on emergency power to avoid detection. Alex had ordered all non-essential systems shut down 3 hours ago when they passed the first sensor grid. Now her ship moved like a ghost through the most protected system in the known galaxy. "Passive sensors detect 47 defense platforms and 36 patrol ships," Park whispered from the sensor station, as if speaking too loudly might alert the enemy to their presence. Alex studied the tactical display showing the fortress at the center of a web of defensive positions. The quantum virus was loaded and ready for transmission, but she had to get close enough to penetrate the station's communication array. The margin for error was measured in seconds rather than minutes. "Signal from the surface," Kane reported, quietly. "Looks like Captain Martinez made it to the Voteran homeworld before his ship was destroyed. The virus is already causing communication disruptions in their military network." A small smile crossed Alex's tired face. Martinez had been like a father to her, one of the few senior officers who had believed in her unconventional tactics. Knowing that he had completed his mission gave her the strength to continue with her own. Reports continued to trickle in from across hegemony space as her scattered fleet carried out their suicide missions. Captain Davis had successfully penetrated Kellish defenses before the Resolute was overwhelmed. Foster's destroyer had reached the Drakmori Coordination Center and transmitted the virus before being destroyed by enemy fire. 10 ships confirmed successful virus deployment, Park reported. Communications disruption is spreading throughout hegemony command networks. Alex nodded grimly. Her friends were dying as planned, but their sacrifices were working. The quantum virus was introducing translation errors and timing delays into communications between different species. Military orders were being misunderstood. Supply convoys were being sent to wrong locations, and coordination between hegemony fleets was beginning to break down. But none of that mattered if Alex couldn't reach the core coordination matrix. The central fortress controlled communication between all 7 species networks. If the virus could be planted there, it would spread throughout the entire hegemony command structure and complete the mission that had already cost 12 ships and their crews. "Approaching final defense perimeter," reported helmsman Ryan Cole from the navigation station. "Automated defense platforms are scanning for incoming threats." Alex watched the tactical display as sensor beams swept past the Defiant. Their stealth systems were holding for now, but the ship's damaged hull was radiating heat signatures that would eventually be detected. She had maybe 10 minutes before the enemy discovered their presence. "All stop," she ordered quietly. "Prepare for emergency acceleration on my command." The Defiant drifted to a halt just outside the fortress's primary defense grid. Alex studied the pattern of patrol ships and automated platforms, looking for a gap that would allow her to reach the communication array. The defensive positions were flawless from a tactical standpoint, but they were designed to stop conventional attacks by large fleets. Nobody had expected a single damaged ship to penetrate this deep into hegemony territory. "There," Alex pointed, to a section of the display where a patrol ship had moved slightly out of position. "We have a window lasting approximately 90 seconds. That's our chance." She opened a channel to all stations throughout the ship. "This is the captain. In 60 seconds we're going to make our final run. I want everyone to know that serving with you has been the greatest honor of my life. Whatever happens next, humanity will survive because of what we do here." The next minute passed in tense silence as the crew made final preparations for an attack that would either save their species or result in their deaths. Alex felt the weight of every decision that had brought them to this moment, from her first day at the academy to the battles that had taught her to think beyond conventional tactics. "Mark," she announced. "All power to engines. Take us in." The Defiant burst from its hiding place and accelerated toward the fortress at maximum speed. Alarms began sounding immediately as enemy sensors detected the human ship. Defense platforms swiveled to track the intruder while patrol ships moved to intercept. "Incoming fire," Park announced as energy beams began reaching toward them. "Multiple contacts converging on our position." Alex gripped her command chair as the ship shook under near misses from enemy weapons. The fortress grew larger in the viewport, its surface covered with communication arrays and sensor dishes that connected the hegemony's vast empire. "Shields failing," O'Brien reported from engineering. "We've got hull breaches on decks 4 and 7. A direct hit from a defense platform tore through the Defiant's port side, venting atmosphere and debris into space. Emergency force fields activated to prevent complete decompression, but the ship was dying around them. "Distance to target?" Alex asked. 2,000 kilometers and closing, Cole replied through gritted teeth as he fought to keep their course stable. 30 seconds to optimal transmission range. Another hit shattered the main viewport, and only the emergency barrier prevented the bridge crew from being sucked into vacuum. Alex could see the fortress's communication array directly ahead, a massive structure that connected 7 different species across thousands of star systems. 15 seconds, Cole announced. The Defiant shuddered as its engines took critical damage. Emergency power flickered throughout the ship as systems began failing one by one. But they were close enough now. Close enough to complete the mission that had cost so many lives. All stop, Alex ordered. Transmit the virus. Transmitting now, Dr. Hayes announced from her position at the computer station. Virus package uploading to Fortress Communication Array. The quantum virus flowed through space like invisible poison, carrying code designed to exploit the cultural differences that held the hegemony together. Within minutes, it would begin introducing subtle errors into communications between species, turning their diversity from strength into fatal weakness. Upload complete, Hayes confirmed. Virus is spreading through their network. Alex felt a moment of profound satisfaction. The mission was accomplished. Humanity would survive because 13 ships and their crews had been willing to sacrifice everything for the greater good. Then the fortress's main cannon fired. The energy beam struck the Defiant's reactor core and tore the ship apart in a burst of light visible from several star systems away. Alex had just enough time to think about her father, who had died attempting a desperate maneuver to save civilian lives, before the explosion consumed everything. 3 days later, a rescue ship from Earth found a single escape pod drifting in the debris field where the Defiant had died. Alex Reed, the youngest captain in Armada history, was unconscious but alive, the sole survivor of humanity's most desperate gambit. She awakened in a medical bay to find Admiral Morrison sitting beside her bed. His expression held a mixture of respect and sorrow that she had never seen before. "The virus worked," he said simply. "Hegemony communications have collapsed completely. Their alliance is fragmenting as different species blame each other for military failures. 3 of the 7 species have already withdrawn from the war." Alex tried to speak, but her throat was too damaged from breathing toxic fumes during the escape pod's life support failure. Morrison continued speaking, his voice heavy with the weight of losses that could never be fully measured. "Captain Martinez destroyed the Voteran Military Command Center. Captain Davis crippled Kellish fleet coordination. Your other officers completed their missions before their ships were destroyed. None of them survived." The silence that followed held the weight of 12 ships and their crews, who had died to save humanity from extinction. Alex closed her eyes and remembered friends who had trusted her judgment, even when it led them into impossible battles. "The war is over," Morrison said quietly. "Not because we won, but because the hegemony can no longer function as a unified force. Several species are already requesting negotiations with Earth. Your tactical innovations and the sacrifice of your crews have saved our civilization." Alex opened her eyes and stared at the ceiling of the medical bay. She was 24 years old, the last surviving officer of a fleet that had died to ensure humanity's future. History would remember the Battle of the Core as the turning point that saved human civilization from extinction. But Alex would remember the faces of friends who had followed her into the darkness between stars, trusting that their deaths would have meaning. She was the youngest captain in Armada history, and now she was the last one standing. The universe was vast and full of wonders yet to be discovered. Somewhere among those distant stars, humanity would build new worlds and forge new alliances, with species that had learned to respect human determination and ingenuity. Alex Reed closed her eyes and dreamed of the future her friends had died to create.